With the closing of the first community consultation polls, it's becoming more likely that we are on the path towards a new skill in old school. As someone who's been watching the conversations on Reddit, YouTube, and Twitch, I thought I would throw in my 2 cents and contribute to the conversation as well. It seems to me that so far, a lot of the consensus seems to be that there should be a new skill, some of which is only for the sake of there being a new skill. I think a lot of this comes from the idea that RuneScape as it is in the original game thrived on the release of new skills. I think a lot of people might be getting nostalgia trapped here though, reminiscing on the day that they woke up to find farming, hunter, or construction as an update to the game. No doubt that this was a fun era of the original game, and it's part of the reason that 2007 was selected as the old school target year. However, I don't think that this is a good enough reason on its own to be adding a skill to old school. I think that the other part of the general consensus is that if a skill is added, that it must fit old school, but no one has been able to identify what fit is in this case, and it might be what JAGEX is trying to get at with this most recent set of polls. Now before we go further, I will admit up front that I am one of the few people that has been largely opposed to a new skill coming to the game. Not because I wouldn't want one, but rather because the risk-reward ratio seems to be too high on the risk side of things for me to feel as though it will be good for the game. The game is in a very good place right now, give or take the frequency of large content updates, which admittedly has improved since Raids 3, at least in my opinion. So, trying to see without nostalgia goggles for the moment, I will now present some ideas to contribute to the conversation, as well as ideas for successful implementation on a new skill, and I will also try to highlight positives that could come from a new skill being added, at least from my perspective as a critic of the idea overall. To begin, there was a reason that 2007 was selected as the time period that old school will be based on. I'm not sure if this reason is a distinct idea, or if it is more of an ambiguous collective factors. Although I do know that after this period of time, the game took a turn for the worst and then never fully recovered. In late 2007 and early 2008, we would see the updates that inevitably removed free trade and the wilderness from the game, and we would also see summoning being released. It wasn't until 2012 that we would then see the evolution of combat update that I think takes the majority of the blame for what killed RS3. Again, I'm inclined to absolutely agree here. EOC was a terrible idea made with poor game design in mind. However, the other major updates I mentioned, and likely other ones that are less known, contributed to reducing the fit and feel of what made RuneScape RuneScape. The loss and longing of that fit and feel was inevitably what fueled the desire for old school. I think that most people likely would be inclined to agree that the free trade and wildy removal were detrimental to the game, but some might disagree with me on summoning. That's fine, but hear me out. Summoning was a skill that fundamentally changed the way that the game was played. Not only that, but it was a skill that you spent most of your time not doing the skill itself in order to train the skill. To truly be playing the core game at that point, you had to be training summoning in order to keep up with the rest of players. Even to be doing other skills, you had to train summoning to get the most out of training those other skills. At the very least, it felt as though they made things interconnected in an unhealthy way. And this was probably one of the first signs that JAGEX had adopted a poor game design mentality. Now I know that summoning isn't on the table currently, but if JAGEX were to release any skill in old school that fundamentally changed the way the game is played, it has the risk of starting to send old school into that same sort of downward spiral that RS3 went in. This is one of my biggest fears about a new skill, especially when seeing that the recent poll got about 20% of players voting for a new combat skill to come to the game. It seems as though many people are not thinking about the game in this big picture fashion. The game is not equipped to deal with a skill that fundamentally changes the way that the game is played. If it did have this, I think the spirit of old school goes out the window, as the fit would be incredibly off. Another area I've seen people suggesting things in is in mounts or some other new system of movement. This would again fall into fundamentally changing the way that the game is played. Frankly, it might make old school completely unrecognizable. So when I'm talking about fundamental ways the game is played, I'm thinking about the systems like combat, movement, food and potion consumption, and prayers. A good way to measure this is, the average player should be able to log in and do Slayer or bossing without noticing a difference if they were unaware of a new skill. And the same goes for PKers. At the same time, those that want it should not be bored by this new skill. There might be something to be said about the top 1% of players also seeing slightly faster world record kill times because of this benefit, or maybe slightly higher EHP, but that is not where the game should be designed. I think that for it to be successful, a new skill must have a strong old school fit, and most importantly, it should identify a hole in the current game that can be filled without that fundamental gameplay change. I think a great example of identifying a hole and filling it with a solution that had strong fit was with the release of Zaya and the reputation or favor system for the different houses. While the core aspects of some of those grinds are absolutely terrible, I'm looking at you, sulfur mining, the new type of system that was added was interesting, rewarding, and was not something that you fundamentally had to interact with to play the core game. Other great examples have been Hallowed Sepulchre, Guardians of the Rift, and Giant's Foundry, although these are really just expanded on skills in a way that make them more immersive. I think a good example of a suggestion for a new skill has been the Inscription skill. I'll link that Reddit post in the description below. In its proposal, this skill has the ability to be an item sync, something that the game is currently lacking, but also it adds a new system of content that could provide interesting and rewarding items to the game, but it does not strike me as something that someone would have to absolutely interact with to play the core game to its capacity. It was also not half-assed in the way that warding was. I think that it still echoes warding though a bit, and could use some more fleshing out in order to not end up just being able to be collapsed into other skills in the same way that warding was. Another popular one, maybe a meme at this point, has been sailing. Now personally, I don't really fancy sailing as a core aspect of the game. It might be an interesting one if done correctly, but I could also just go play Sea of Thieves. That's sarcasm. A more interesting skill might be something like exploration, that can have an element of sailing as a component of the skill, but also offers much more. It could be integrated into the current game fairly seamlessly, and allow for new content updates with new areas entirely. It would open a doorway to help new players explore the game in a way that could healthily integrate current skills together, but could also be completely ignored by those that wanted to. I think that something in this vein is a good way to also add a skills-based task system, similar to Slayer, where instead of going out and killing monsters, maybe your task is to go out and clear cut the willow logs at Draenor Village, or mine gold under Witchhaven. In the same way that Slayer integrates combat skills, it might be a way to both add a new skill, a new system, and to integrate the current game in a way that is healthy but not mandatory. These were just some spitball ideas I had based on what I've been seeing in the conversation so far. Personally, I don't envy the J-mods. This task is an exceptionally difficult one. I do have good faith in them that they are genuinely doing their best and have the best intentions for the health of the game and the community. But trying to keep enough of the community happy with the skill, or rather trying to not piss off a lot of people, is a delicate balance. I think the biggest hurdle to the new skill will be community consensus. I have my doubts that the community will ever come to a genuine consensus. I also hope that the devs are smart enough not to push too hard if the community does not reach a genuine consensus. Because what would be worse, not having a new skill, or potentially ending up with a dead game? At its worst outcome, there is the possibility that a new skill will lead us down the path of RS3, and I don't think that this has been earnestly talked about enough. My absolute doomsday scenario would be JAGEX pushing out a half-ready, half-assed skill based on poor game design, just for the sake of adding a skill, or even worse, for the marketing it could bring. So that is top-down pressure from the corporate side of the company. But on the flip side, if a new skill is done well, it has huge potential. It has the potential to bring back old players from burnout or boredom. It has the potential to be a big draw for RS3 players. It also has the ability to be a huge marketable opportunity in a good way, similarly to Group Ironman, that could bring in genuinely new players to RuneScape. Although, as a quick aside, I really hope that JAGEX learned some lessons on how to market from Group Ironman, as I think there were some clear problems with their approach there. The new skill also has an opportunity to set a precedent for the longevity of old school. It could bring in a new golden age that makes the game feel full of life, similarly to when leagues come out, or slipping back on our nostalgia goggles when we woke up to find farm patches or a house portal for the first time. So to summarize, old school is a delicate ecosystem. If we aren't careful with the new skill, we could see ecological collapse. A new skill should strive for old school fit by filling an identified gap in a way that does not fundamentally change the game, but also offers new interesting content and integrates other aspects of the game in a healthy way, but not a mandatory one, so that it could also be ignored if people just want to play the core game. Personally, I have my doubts, but time will tell and we shall see what comes. Let me know what you think of my points in the comments below, especially if you disagree with me. I'm one of the few people that I think is definitely open to changing my opinion on things. Or if you don't want to disagree or agree with me, consider answering some of the following questions. What do you think about how JAGEX is handling the discussion and the development of a new skill so far? What do you think is necessary in a good new skill? What do you not want to see come to the game? Or what do you think about how people have been handling the discussion so far? Also, if you don't mind and you made it this far, throw this video a like and a subscribe if you're new. It really helps the channel grow. And I know that this is a bit different from my other videos so far, but I got a spark of inspiration when I saw those polls being completed today, so hopefully you still enjoyed the conversation. I'm really excited to see what the next phase of JAGEX's plans are for this and for the future of old school in general. But for now, maybe check out one of my other videos, should be on screen right now. And I just want to thank you all for watching. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.